Executive Director of the Minnesota Catholic Conference. And Inside the Capitol is your look at what's going on in St. Paul from a Catholic perspective. Today we have a very special guest, Anne Krisnik, Executive Director of the Joint Religious Legislative Coalition. You might not know this, but Minnesota Catholic Conference co-sponsors with 3 other faith organizations the JRLC, and the purpose of that is to bring together the faith communities of Minnesota and join them together in an ecumenical and interfaith way doing anti-poverty and social justice advocacy. In this way, the voice of the church is both amplified, but then joined together with other faith communities in a compelling witness about the importance of certain public policies at the Capitol. Anne, it's great to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about what drew you to interfaith advocacy work.
I think there are 2 pieces. First, I'm going to start with a little bit different question, which is what drew me to social justice work, and that's absolutely Catholic social teaching, which talks about our need to make sure that we're looking out for those who are less fortunate than we are, the widow, the orphan, the neighbor. And the interfaith is really appealing because it shows how many of our views are shared by people of other faiths. And when I'm over at the Capitol and I can say all of these faith traditions agree that these issues of human dignity and justice are key and central to what we need to do, it gives us tremendous power, I think, and the arguments are much stronger than simply interest groups that say we think this is a good thing.
So tell us a little bit about some of the key legislative priorities for the JRLC this year at the Capitol.
Well, we've had 3, and we have very up-to-the-minute updates since the conference committee report, which was released yesterday in Health and Human Services. Our top priority was getting some increase for people in the Minnesota Family Investment Program, and these are really our poorest families that are struggling and trying to make sure that they can have a good start for their children. And it's been 31 years since there was any increase in the MFIP program. So the report yesterday just got released. There's a modest increase for families, and when you're really struggling, every dollar makes a difference. I'm sure that your viewers know that when you're poor, you become very creative about how you're going to make ends meet, and any increase matters. So that'll be great. That'll be in the report, and we'll see what happens in the negotiations with the governor. The second issue was a JRLC initiated issue that the Minnesota Catholic Conference has also been very supportive of, not just as a sponsor, but very aggressively in your network as well. And that's for those families that are in MFIP, the Minnesota Family Investment Program, to remove what's kind of built in as a marriage disincentive. What often happens is you may have a single parent, they meet someone, they'd really love to get married. We know that marriage is a great way to move out of poverty. It's good for kids emotionally, financially, a whole bunch of ways. But if your potential spouse had really any income at all, that often put them over the dollar limit for which they were eligible for benefits, because it's set so low. It's at the federal poverty guidelines. So for a family of 4, that's $24,300. So you'd often have people saying we'd really like to get married, but if we do, we're going to lose not only that benefit, but tied with that is eligibility for child care. So it made families have a really difficult time deciding what to do, especially if they were about to have a baby and would be out of the workforce, would have an infant for child care. So we had a bill to, for a period of time, not include the new spouse's income, and it just would give the family time to sort of figure their finances out and have their footing a little bit better. And so there was a provision in the report that will move on to the governor for a period of 12 months. So for a full year, that new income wouldn't be included. There are some caps on there. If your new spouse makes more than 275% of the federal poverty guideline, it doesn't apply.
Naturally.
So, this is just for people who really use that extra benefit to do that. And then our third priority, we have a number that we work on, but our top 3 is expansion of the working family credit. And I think we're just going to have to wait to see how negotiations go. That hasn't been a top priority at all for people in the tax committees, but the governor has talked about it. It's really a cornerstone of his tax program and a way to really address challenges facing low and moderate income Minnesotans.
Yeah, and we hope the exclusion of that from the tax bill that's being proposed by the House and Senate is really just horse trading, and that hopefully it'll be included eventually in that final bill. You got to leave a few things out of there in negotiations, right? So.
Yeah, and there are a lot of indicators that that's true. Last year, the chair of the House Tax Committee was one of the co-authors of the working family expansion. It was included in the bill last year that was passed and then didn't get signed because of some drafting errors. So we are optimistic on that, but we'll have to wait and see. That's going to come along later in the process.
And there's been a lot of good bipartisan support for all 3 of these things. Talk a little bit about that.
But especially, I'll start with the marriage bill, which I think is the biggest one to remove the disincentive, is it's so practical. And we're able to really say this is a way to really help families move into sufficiency, self-sufficiency, and get rid of this economic instability that they're dealing with. And so when you kind of go in and you can explain the reality of what's there, it's been very good. One of the things that is wonderful about our network is we can draw on all those faith traditions. So we have Catholics, Protestants, Jews, and Muslims all talking about these issues. So you can draw examples from all of those, and you can get people. One of the big things that is important about our network, as is your network, is it's truly statewide. And so one of the things as we move through the process is we can have people from the district of the people who are in the conference committee, or from the people that are going to be hearing bills, actually call them and share stories about this is what we see in our faith community, this is what we see in our parish. And the reality is on all of these issues, the faith communities are doing a really heavy lift to help people in poverty and to help struggling Minnesotans. And they have very relevant stories about people that they see that are trying their hardest. And when you can go in with those actual examples and show that on all of those issues, it's really helpful.
And again, it's not just the faith communities asking the government to do more, it's the faith community saying we're doing lots, and how can the state supplement some of those efforts, because the faith communities can't do it all. The problem is just so great in many instances.
I'm sure that people in the network have heard the story, so I'll condense it, but about, think of this as a small Minnesota town where someone's out by the river and all of a sudden a basket floats by and there's a baby in the basket. So what would any Minnesota town do? They'd go into the water and get the basket and bring it into town, and people would be donating cribs and diapers and taking turns watching the baby. And if that happens 2 or 3 times, pretty soon there'd be a lifeguard station looking for baskets as they come down the river. But then one of the elders says, let's go up the river and see why this is happening. So there's a lot of direct service, a lot of charity that our parishes and people in our network are doing. And what our goal is, which is really what your goal is how do we look at the system and go back up and really say what are the changes that need to happen to help people be successful on their own.
Policy does make a difference. And one of the exciting things about JRLC's work is that it supplements some of the things that we've been talking about here. Minnesota Catholic Conference that you heard about in prior editions, but really focuses on family poverty and bringing together that interfaith perspective to that. The faith community, it's a powerful voice when the faith community can both emphasize the importance of addressing the issues of poverty, but also to do so through the lens of family and family economic stability. And that's really, I think, sort of a sweet spot for the faith community and their voice. One other thing that JRLC's been working on this year that we want to highlight too is opposition to gambling expansions. So help our viewers understand a little bit about what's going on with that issue as well.
There's been a bill last year, this year, I'm sure we'll keep seeing it, to legalize, this isn't the way they kind of talk about it, but the fantasy sports gambling. And right now it's an open question in Minnesota about whether that's gambling, which hinges on whether that's skill or chance. And the people that are involved in that industry came to the Capitol and said, we want you to regulate us and kind of set the rules about what we do with gambling, which is always sort of suspicious. When somebody wants to be regulated, that's not usually what you see industries doing. And really what the goal is to make clear that this fantasy sports gambling was totally lawful in Minnesota. And faith communities have seen throughout the state the impact that gambling has on families, really addictive, especially to younger Minnesotans that are used to playing on their iPhones and having access so quickly. And so one of the real concerns is that if this bill were to pass, we'd see huge expansion of advertising, promotion. When you look at the data from the Gambling Association, a significant portion of the people that are gambling now are under 18. So although the bill says we wouldn't market to anybody over, under that age, when you look at things that have happened in other states, that's not really the case. So the JRLC has consistently opposed any expansion of gambling, and this is a particular concern, as I said, because of the impact on young students. You can just imagine people betting on their basketball game while they're in class, or they wake up late at night, or they're up on their phone. So there have been a number of groups, expressing concern about that. But the faith community has been very strong about saying this is a bad idea, bad idea, bad idea. And right now, I don't think that bill's going to go anywhere this session. So it's a concern. It's a real concern.
That's good news. Gambling addiction has such an impact on families, young people. It's addictive and especially exploitative of those in poverty as well. So a big concern. JRLC's really carried the flag on that issue and gambling expansion for a number of years, and that's something we'll continue to watch as well. And if folks want to know more about how they can get involved in advocacy from an interfaith and ecumenical perspective, where can they learn more?
They can go to our website, JRLC for Joint Religious Legislative Coalition.org, and we'd love to have you join our network.
So just like with the Minnesota Catholic Conference Catholic Advocacy Network, JRLC has its own network that focuses on a lot of the same things that we focus on at MCC, but also amplifies some more issues directly related to poverty and social justice. So definitely encourage folks interested in those issues to check out the JRLC, Joint Religious Legislative Coalition, at jrlc.org. But as always, you can continue to follow what's going on at the Capitol through our website, Minnesota Catholic Conference, mncatholic.org. Again, that's mncatholic.org. Anne, thanks for being with us today. I'm Jason Adkins, and this has been another edition of Inside the Capitol, your look at what's going on in St. Paul from a Catholic perspective. Thanks so much.